Okay, so we're jumping back on a video because we really enjoyed it and we love collaborating with one another. And we had such a tremendous amount of feedback. We had lots of people reach out and lots of people say, hey, I might have POTS or my child might have POTS. And so we're really excited. We've had colleagues, other naturopaths reach out. And so we wanted to get on again, and we did a little bit of a poll in our email blast you might have seen, and one of the top requests was to talk about mitochondria and mitochondrial medicine. And so we're going to go through that today. We're not going to go forever, but we'd like to do sort of like a 10-20 minute overview. So mitochondria make all the energy in the body, and as I sort of share what mitochondria are, I'm going to bring up a little picture here. So we've got couple PowerPoints we're going to work off of, and this is the one that we used when we were in China. And basically, when we look at the mitochondria, it produces all the energy in the body. They're uniquely sensitive to stress. And one of the best things I heard about mitochondria is essentially it makes ATP for everything that we do as humans. There's nothing that we do that does not require energy or ATP, from looking, making eye contact with children diagnosed with autism, to talking, to moving, coordination, brain function. Many of you know this, but our brain is actually only 15% neurons. Neurons are kind of like that old school telephone, right? It's like a wire that you send information along. But 85% of the brain is immune system. And that immune system needs ATP or mitochondria to broadcast signals. So that this gets into autism, ADHD, Parkinson's, degenerative concerns, dementia, Alzheimer's, brain fog post-COVID. So I'm really excited, and we'll try to keep it fairly concise. But one thing I wanted to show you is one of my favorite videos. It's done by Harvard, and let's see here if I don't know if I'm set up for it. Let me just get it on my screen here, and then I'll go back to share. Everyone's keeping in mind that I'm fairly tech challenged, and that's going to be part of the fun part of these videos. So this is great. I've kept the noise off here just because I want to show you what's happening inside the cell. This video is wonderful because actually, as you sort of move forward, you can see the energy being produced. So mitochondria are very efficient. They make energy very efficiently. So it's about 70% efficiency compared to our car engine, which is about 10%. The mitochondria are uniquely sensitive to damage and toxins. And so we know in autism that there is very much a link to mitochondrial impairment, so less production of energy, and autism. And so when we talk to parents, we talk a lot about, if you can improve energy production for your child, you are going to see improvements. And this is one of my favorite parts, where you just see these sparks. That's ATP. And so whenever I talk about mitochondria, whether I'm doing it, with colleagues or with patients, Carissa and I have had the opportunity to actually do some classroom stuff with kids. So I talked about mitochondria with kindergartners and with high schoolers, and I always use that video because it's literally the spark of life. So it's very neat. Cell danger response. This is a paper that I'll often tell naturopaths in particular. Really important paper by Dr. Navio. I always say this is our medicine, right? The cell membranes are damaged. The cell membranes then change. They become more rigid. It's hard to get things in, like zinc we talked about last time, like essential fats. That's why it's so important to be putting carnitine in. And once the cell membrane is damaged, the mitochondria essentially start sending out a panic signal that Dr. Navio has termed the cell danger response. And once you have this situation, you can get inflammation, chronic oxidative stress, impairment in methylation, depletion of glutathione. And so these very much are the hallmark of many chronic concerns, particularly sort of in my world of autism. And so Carissa wanted me to sort of get some of my information in there so she can take it as a jumping off point. But what happens in autism, Down syndrome, in cerebral palsy, God forbid, if a child's had a stroke, cystic fibrosis, that you have a downstream mitochondrial weakness for varying reasons. And in autism, what we end up with motor planning issues. And if you've got anyone has my manual, you can sort of take a look at my perspective on the research as it relates to autism, but everything we do requires ATP, and ATP is required for motor planning. So, what is a motor plan? A motor plan is when your sensory system and your motor system cooperate to get things done. And so if I'm going to get out of this chair, I need to first write a motor plan. That's, 40 to 100 to 200 steps where I'd have to clench my muscles in the right order. I'd have to, turn my head, turn my body. And this has to have muscles firing in the proper sequence very quickly. But before I can even move, the motor plan is sent off to the sensory system. And the sensory system gives the input, like, am I getting up and it's icy? Are there rocks? Am I holding a baby? Do I have to shift my weight? So motor planning relies on ATP. ATP is produced by mitochondria. Mitochondrial impairment is a hallmark of autism. So that means it's happening in all our children with autism. And it has a huge impact on children's ability to move their eyes, look at you, process information, communicate with expressive communication. I'll often hear parents say things like, well, I don't think they even know their name. They know their name. They don't have the motor planning or the ATP to support responding. So that could be pointing. Pointing is a motor plan. And so some of the really interesting research on severity of autism is that the more severe the motor planning concern, the more severe the presentation of autism. If you don't have the energy in your muscles or the motor planning or coordination to respond to people with language, or to turn your head in acknowledgement that you've heard something, or to point, it's very difficult to understand how much a person with autism understands. Well, after 18 years, I think most of our families would agree our kids understand almost everything. It is their motor planning that holds them back. And so the beautiful part about this is that when we improve motor planning, we improve quality of life. And so these are great. We can send this out. This PowerPoint can be sent out to anyone. So just give us an email, info@naturalcareclinic.ca. And then Carissa wanted me to sort of touch on this methylation piece, which I will, but just before I do that, remember that in autism, visual motor planning is one of the most significant medical concerns that goes untreated. And so if you can't process the world from a visual perspective by tracking moving information, that's a motor planning, visual motor planning, your whole brain changes and slows down in certain areas to try to help the visual processing and integration improve. And so if your child has any visual symptoms, flapping in front of the eyes, lining up, touching the corner of their eyes, looking out at the corner of their eyes, rocking, this is on our website. We can add this to the link when we send the video out, that these visual symptoms are medical, they're based in mitochondrial impairment, and they're really, really treatable. So let's see here, where's my little circles that I love? Here they are. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm constantly talking about methylation in very simple terms. It's essential that we understand the pink wheel and the green wheel. So the pink wheel is the folate cycle. That is why it's so important when you're looking to improve mitochondrial function to remove the synthetic folic acid from your diet. Grains are fortified with synthetic folic acid. And synthetic folic acid for many people, particularly with this MTHFR, SNP, or other problems in methylation, they cannot convert the synthetic folic acid into its active form. So that's methyl tetrahydrofolate and folinic acid. So when people talk about having methylation issues or mitochondrial issues, we really need to be looking at supporting them to go onto a paleo diet or a modified ketogenic diet, an SCD diet, because grains are not your friend if you have weak mitochondria. This part of the grain cycle, this is the transmethylation cycle, it relies on B12. Not to go too heavily into this, but grains also contain propionic acid. That's the research of Dr. Derek McFabe, which won a top 50 scientific findings in Canadian history. Propionic acid depletes intracellular B12, and you end up with really low B12 levels. We know in autism and aging and schizophrenia, in the brain tissue, there's very low B12. So to support these cycles, we need to pull the grains out, add lots of active folates in. MTHFR needs B2. B2 is very much a mitochondrial support, and we need to put in enough B12 to get that green cycle moving. And these two cycles actually then donate a methyl group to 200 other pathways in the body. And Chris is going to talk about a few of these pathways sort of more specifically as it relates to things like Lyme disease and long COVID. So was there anything else in there, Carissa, that you wanted me to touch on, or you think I missed anything?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to jump off here if you want to share your info, and I'll mute and give you a chance to share all your clinical expertise.
Can you give me the power of the share?
Oh, the power of the share. I'm not sure. You know, it's all right.
Oh, thanks. All right. Oh dear. One sec. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'm very visual, but you know the pink and the green wheels that Sonya was just talking about, where you support those two wheels and you push downstream and you get more outcome downstream. This is just another picture that looks like that piece. So this is what's on our walls, and the pink circle is right here and the green circle is right here. And when we're talking about mitochondria, we're talking about the Krebs cycle. That's right here. So what Sonya's saying is she pumps the pink and the green wheel, gives the body more energy and ATP, takes out anything in the diet that will slow down that power or the speed of the two gears cranking fast, 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 so that she can give her kids energy and ATP in the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle, however old you are, whatever it's called. And this is the way you get energy and ATP. So smooth down this pathway. I'll talk about a couple of things that are kind of side pieces off this, but when we're talking about mitochondrial medicine, it's this pathway. And I mean, I think we can really steal from the autism world, like not to be mean or anything, but if Sonya can get kids to speak, that's phenomenal. And that piece is like a miracle that it's happening, but she's had a step-by-step process to do it. And we can use that in other conditions, but the ASD protocol to make the body have more mitochondria is life-changing for lots of people. So when we're looking at a little bit more information, the Krebs cycle, when you expand it a little bit, looks like this. It's just, you can see it's got more cofactors, but a lot of these cofactors are going to be vitamin and mineral dependent. So if we can get the body to push and get faster Krebs cycle output, then we can get more system response. So a lot of the things that I wound up doing, I just copied Sonya. So because the ASD, the autism protocol, works on the speed of the mitochondria. It also, Sonya was talking about the cell danger response. So there's sort of two different ideas. The cell danger response damages the cells or the membrane, and then the mitochondria basically is impaired. So one of the ways we give the body more fuel is to give it actual more Krebs cycle. One of the conditions that we do this for, a couple of conditions we do this for, but a lot of the complex cases that I've seen, I put in the ASD protocol, I put in the autism protocol, and it worked amazing. Like my chronic cases, my chronic pain cases, my chronic infection cases, my complex cases, I put them on an autism protocol in two ways. One, to pump up more power in the ATP, mitochondrial support, and the other one is more fat soluble nutrients to slow down cell damage response, to slow down the damage that's just cyclical, like waves in the ocean. It just doesn't stop. That's Dr. Matt Navio's cell danger response. If we can stop the cell danger response with fat soluble nutrients, and then we can provide more power and ATP with the Krebs cycle fuel, then we get the best of both worlds. And now the more recent example is the long COVID piece. If we're having people that got COVID and didn't recover, the research is now showing that's mitochondrial damage, and they're having constant damage in the cell danger response. Something was actual real infection, damages the system, the body freaked out, and it dumped into this cell danger response, which is constant, like the ocean, waves and waves and waves of cell danger response. So if we can block it or mitigate it or dam it, that would be this kind of fat soluble idea, the vitamin E, the coenzyme Q10, the carnitine, stop cell danger response, but that also feeds more power into the mitochondria. Another example of supporting mitochondria is with POTS, posterior orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or my heart beats fast when I stand up. So these folks will present with many different symptoms, some of them GI symptoms, some of them pain, but the big one is kind of when I stand up, my heart beats fast, or I stand up, I get dizzy. And it's very clinical, you know, like there can be low blood volume, there can be a massive amount of adrenaline being pumped through the system. There can be like 4 or 5 different cofactors, but these folks also have mitochondrial deficiency. So if you give them more nutrients, more energy, more ATP, these are just a few of the cofactors that are low. If you go look at where those have a huge part to play, it's in the Krebs cycle, which is the mitochondrial support. We actually wound up making a POTS formula with a lot of these cofactors in because we're missing them in a formula. The cofactors that Sonya's put in forever forever. She made a combination called spectrum solutions, and that's what we use for the complex cases to make sure the Krebs cycle cofactors are met. So the B1 specifically is very helpful for a lot of kind of POTS people. And that's because the B1 is needed for the neurotransmitter release, mitochondrial function, calcium channel action. There's lots of things that B1 does that nobody else does. And that piece is also hardwired in the mitochondrial piece. For me, with my Lyme patients, we find that Lyme is one of those minerals that unfortunately that infection depletes. So most infections like iron, but Lyme likes manganese. If your manganese is stolen from your body, you'll jam up a pathway called the SOD pathway. Manganese has lots of good benefits, but when you jam up the SOD pathway, you actually stop the body from making its own antibiotic called hydrogen peroxide. So if your body stops the manganese is all depleted in your system, you can't trigger the SOD pathway, which is right here. Your Krebs cycle is later downstream. You block energy that's going to your Krebs cycle, but you also can no longer kill what you've been exposed to because this infection killed the cofactor. So that's sort of a mitochondrial in action when it's very specific to infection. All right, back to you, Son. Oh wait, your video, I'll stop sharing too.
Perfect. So one thing I just wanted to add in here quickly is thanks to Dr. Ben Lynch, right? Because Dr. Ben Lynch has created these pathway planners and was generous enough actually to share with me recently his more updated pathway planner. So I wanted to bring that up too and just sort of go into, oops, I don't know if this is planner, let's see here. There we go, perfect. So this pathway planner, and I guess I have to share my screen too, right? It's so hilarious. I find our tech stuff makes me laugh. And I never know what's actually being shared, but that's okay. Well, it'll be fun. Here we go. So here is the pathway planner. Again, thanks to Ben Lynch. And when we look at this sort of SOD pathway, that's where Chris is talking here. But I wanted to, we have a lot of folks on these really disgusting high dose multivitamins. And I wanted to really, get you to take a look just quickly at why. Chris explained it on a micro view, and I love that. I like to explain it on a macro view. We talk a lot about neuroinflammation, which happens here. We talk a lot about serotonin. We talk a lot about dopamine. And so every single one of these little green things here is reliant on a vitamin or a mineral. And so people who have chronic health concerns need a lot of vitamins and a lot of minerals. Now in children, the trick is to give them the highest amount you possibly can without jeopardizing safety, but while still staying lower on doses that may have to stay in the more pediatric reference ranges. And so that's where you find these autism focused multivitamins. They're really gross, as you probably know, they're really high dose, but they're going to actually make all of these different pathways work. And all of these white parts are genes. And so when people talk about SNPs and they talk about methylation, they talk about detoxification, keep in mind to get to glutathione, how many vitamins you need to make these genes work. And so if you ever wonder why we've decided to recommend something that's really quite disgusting, that's why. That's really why. I think there was a citric acid cycle one in here, but I don't think we need to show the specifics of that. I think you know what I'm talking about. Here's that transmethylation pathway. So just look at how many vitamins we need to actually get the job done. So one thing I wanted to look at is just quickly the motor planning piece. Motor planning is not just for expressive communication. Yes, motor planning and mitochondrial medicine can and often does improve expressive language, articulation. It can really help in speech delay. It helps for children diagnosed with autism, children with Down syndrome. It also, keep in mind, to communicate non-verbally, you need to use your body to respond, to show acknowledgement. A lot of our families do RPM, which is rapid prompting method. They need to be able to point to a letter board. All of that depends on motor planning. So the mitochondria love fat. That's why we recommend really high dose things like cod liver oil or fish oil. The mitochondria thrive when the body has enough fat soluble vitamins. So that's vitamin A, vitamin D. Vitamin E is very interesting because vitamin E in all its different forms, so 8 mixed tocopherols and the tocotrienols, which I never say properly, but the vitamin E can actually protect and spare the mitochondria from damage. And so this is why we see it's such a powerful treatment in the world of motor planning, in the world of autism. And so again, this high dose vitamin E protocol was developed by Claudia Morris, and Claudia Morris is a pediatrician and researcher down in the United States. And so she discovered that there are lots of children diagnosed with autism who actually need 100 milligrams per kilogram or up to 300 milligrams per kilogram per day of mixed tocopherols. So that's a lot, right? So we have kids in our practice who they have trouble looking, they have trouble responding, they have trouble speaking, they have trouble often, you know, with their fine motor skills. And maybe I'll pull up that PowerPoint and show you my little funny guy that I think I send this to all my patients. So if you guys you guys see me, you're going to be familiar with my homunculus picture that I send everyone. So let's see if I can show you this. I'm going to share my screen. Here's my little homunculus guy. Right. So the energy in our body is allocated in more, you know, in some areas need more mitochondrial production of ATP and some require less. So when you look at vision, talking, you know, coordination, and remember that, you know, visual processing and verbal communication are the finest of the fine motor skills. Energy production to supply those areas is much higher than the rest of the body. And then the other one I would add in is this mitochondrial production of ATP is essential for motility, gut motility. And so that's why so many of our complicated cases also have that fecal loading, which I think we should probably jump on and do a whole thing on fecal loading and how to treat it, because as many of you know, and you can sort of see in these subsequent pictures, if your mitochondria is not supporting the motility of the gut, and the gut is 15 feet long, you're going to end up with pockets of stool, particularly as the body's fighting gravity to get rid of it. And so we've had a lot of great support or great success supporting the motility by also supporting mitochondria. Back to you, I think, because that's kind of all I wanted to touch on.
Yeah, I think the long COVID piece has just been interesting the last little while. I think I touched on it real quick, but these long COVID cases are we lean on the ASD, the autism protocols, and a lot of the folks that present to us to the long COVID are getting better very quickly. So those that don't need the water soluble nutrients or don't the POTS, so the long COVID pieces, you treat the POTS and you treat the mitochondrial support and things like high dose vitamin E, coenzyme Q10 carnitine. These people are recovering their function again because the damage created, you know, cell danger response. And once you slow that down and provide more fuel, there's benefit right away. So I think we just stole from what Sonya knew and we applied it to sort of a certain subset of the population, but it winded up all being mitochondrial support.
Yeah, and I mean, I learned this from the autism docs, right? So when you're looking at Dan Rossignol and Dr. Navio and Julie Buckley and Claudia Morris and that phenomenal group of physicians and researchers who've helped so many people, and Ben Lynch, certainly with the pathway planners, it's been so helpful to really understand how many nutrients support mitochondrial function and how many pathways are intertwined. So thanks for jumping on with us, and let us know if you want the PowerPoint or you have any questions about that. I know that for me, I had a lot of people reach out with the POTS and really hoping that those folks are feeling better soon. So same goes for mitochondrial medicine.
Thanks, bye.